Hi, my name is Ari Wolfeiler. Welcome to a special Jewish Voice for Peace briefing on yesterday's Israeli elections. I'm very pleased to introduce you to our two speakers today. With me are Salah Mohsen, who is the media director at Adala, the Legal Center for Arab Minority Rights in Israel, where he has worked since 2007, and Noam Shezaf, an Israeli journalist and editor and executive director of 972 magazine. Thank you both so much for being with us today. How are you?
Very good. Hi. Good evening.
So I wanted to ask first, actually, that you just explain quite simply how Israeli elections work. Who gets to vote? What are they voting for? And how does that determine who ends up in elected positions?
So the people who get to vote in the election are Israeli citizens, which means 80% Jews and 20% Palestinian citizens of Israel. These are the Palestinians who are living in 48 borders, or so-called Palestinians of 48. We had a very high turnout, around 70%, over 70%, which is the highest turnout since 1999. Also due to a large participation by Palestinian citizens this time. There are 120 Knesset members in the Israeli parliament. The elections are direct proportional elections, which means that it's not regional. Every list that gets above 3.25% of vote gets into the Knesset. If you get below that, you're disqualified and all the votes are not counted. The election results, should I fill you in about that a bit for a second?
I think that would be great, please.
Yeah, so the polls before the elections were, speaking of a really tight contest between Yitzhak Herzog, the leader of what formerly was called Labour and now is called the Zionist camp, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In practice, we had something closer to a landslide in favor of Bibi. The Likud party won 30 seats in the Knesset. That's a quarter of the Knesset, almost 1 million votes. That's the highest result the Likud, in terms of votes, not in terms of Knesset seats, that the Likud got. And other right-wing parties and the ultra-Orthodox party complete to a majority of 66 to 67. We still need to see about one seat. 66 to 67 members out of the Knesset 120. Once you get past the 61 threshold, it means that you have a coalition that can establish a ruling government. If when the exit poll was published, we didn't exactly know how it's going to happen, by the morning Yitzhak Herzog conceded, and it's clear that Netanyahu is going to be the prime minister.
Great. And maybe Salah, you can pick up here. Can you explain for us a bit about what does this mean for who's likely to be in that coalition when it's all said and done, and what does it mean for any shifts in Israeli government policies?
Actually, the main surprise for this election for me was that the votes or the seats moved inside the camps, what we call. Like inside the central left camp, they remained the same power, and inside the right wing, they remained the same power. The Likud took seats from Israel Beitenu of Avigdor Lieberman and from Abayit Yehudi of Naftali Bennett, and the same in the other side. The Zionist camp took seats from Yesh Atid of Yair Lapid, and nothing moved between the camps. Like Israel did not move to the right or to the wing in this time. The coalition that will be formed now will be more right-wing because of let's say about the Likud. The Likud now is more dangerous than it used to be before, like with all these new Knesset members that elected recently and got a very high position in the Likud party list. All the Miri Regev and other right-wing, very right-wing, extreme right-wing Knesset members inside the Likud, Zev Elkin and others. So in general, nothing changed in this between the camps. But I think that this time is a bit more complicated and more dangerous because Netanyahu has more legitimacy now all the time in the past year or so, there was kind of a feeling that Netanyahu and the Likud government, and now and he will be more power to do whatever he thinks.
Great. So follow up on that, I think we heard some debate in the U.S. media about this election to questioning whether or not there would be, whether it mattered, whether there was a real choice to be made here. And so I hear you saying that this is a dangerous turn and how it turns out. But do you think had it gone the other way and had the Zionist camp come out on top, would we really be in a different situation, and in what way?
Is it me or Salah this time?
I want to hear from both of you.
Okay, so maybe I totally agree with Salah. I think the right did strengthen a bit in those elections, but it's not substantial. The blocs remain the same. Salah is right. Netanyahu is going to have a right-wing government with almost no centrist element this time, no checks on his power, but it also has to do, as Salah mentioned, with the national mood. I think that there was a feeling that Netanyahu needs to be careful, and now the public practically endorsed everything that Netanyahu said and even further. So, and the campaign was really vicious and wild at some points, and the public supporting Netanyahu with such an overwhelming majority will mean a lot for the coming year or two. Could it have been different? In hindsight, obviously not, but I don't think that Yitzhak Herzog or Labour we're going to end the occupation, if you're going to ask me. I think that the circumstances here simply don't exist. Not in terms of the public in Israel and its willingness to conduct the internal battle that will require ending the occupation, but also in terms of the geopolitical circumstances in the region, which I think played a major role in the psyche of the Israeli electorate. But I do think that in terms of the internal relations between Palestinian citizens and Jewish citizens, things would have been much different if it was been a more moderate government. Netanyahu and the right has a kind of toxic effect on the relations between Jews and Arabs, and that was visible even in the campaign itself. So I don't expect good developments right now. I fear that there'll be a campaign against our parliament members.
If it seems we've lost Noam, are you there?
I can carry on a little bit from where Noam stopped.
Thank you.
Two things. I think for your first question, that the tragic mistake or a problem with the central left in Israel is that they don't propose any alternative for Netanyahu. Actually, they are repeating the same thing that Netanyahu says with a bit different rhetoric, but they don't bring any other solution that might be good or relevant, that might change the situation of the people here in this area. So they are trying to say that they are not, they even saying that they are not left but central left, and they're actually repeating the same thing that Netanyahu says, that we don't have any serious partner in the other side of the in the Palestinian Authority, and they don't come and say the clear thing about the solution that they can bring for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or bring any other agenda or any other. They are trying to play on the social economic situation inside Israel, and this election clearly proves that in Israel the main thing in the election is the political situation, the political questions about the situation with the Palestinians, about the relations with the Arabs, with the surrounding world, and the issues of social and economic issues are not very important for the Israeli voters. If you look into the surveys and the polls that were conducted during the past period, you will hear all the time that Israel are concerned about is the housing issues, the employment issues, poverty issues. But then, in the day of the election, you can see that the Likud that neglected all these issues, didn't do anything about, and the man responsible for problems in these issues took 30 seats. So this again proves that if you want to win the elections in Israel, you have to say things about the life of everybody here, which is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And the Labour Party and the Zionist camp, once after each time comes again and again and saying that and trying not to touch this issue because and to try to say that they will carry on basically about what Netanyahu says about it.
And I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit too, through the lens of the joint list and their fortunes in this election. I think that that was a big question in the media here in the United States, and certainly amongst movement activists, is how much power would these parties be able to hold by banding together, and also what happens now, and will the list be able to hold? So especially in the face of what you just described, and I think we all heard the really extreme racism coming from Netanyahu just in the very last couple of days of the election. What do things look like from the perspective of the joint list? What do things look like from the perspective of Palestinian citizens of Israel?
Actually, the joint list earned 14 seats, which is a very significant power, and the Palestinian citizens of Israel raised their representation in the Knesset with three seats, almost 25% more than they had in the past elections, and this is significant. But what happened is that we all the time thought that the Herzog and Livni are winning this election, and then they will go for national unity. We call it in Arabic and Hebrew like coalition with the Likud party, and the joint list will be the head of the opposition in Israel. This could be the best situation, or one of the good situations. And the other situation that the joint list will be like supporting Herzog Livni's government from outside, and that will give it a huge power and the power to demand things and to achieve things for the Palestinian citizens of Israel. But what happened during the past few weeks is that every candidate from the big parties in Israel were asked to his opinion if he would sit in the same government with the joint list, and all of them said that they are not willing to sit in a government that supports that contend with Arabs, with Arab MKs. So, but actually, this was a very a kind of incitement against Palestinians, because when you say that you are not ready or not willing to sit with Arabs in a coalition or coalition supported by Arabs, actually you say that they are not legitimate citizens and they are not legitimate MKs. And this is kind of a continuing trend that used to be very strong in this election. In the right wing, they used to incite a lot against Palestinians, against the Arab MKs. It started with raising the threshold in the elections in order to try to endorse the Arab representation in the Knesset, and then the Arab contend this joint list and run together to the election. And then we had the disqualification of MK Hanin Zobi, the disqualification of Arab MKs or Arab parties used to be a part of each Israeli election in the past 15 years. Each time the election committee disqualify one of the Arab MKs or one of the Arab parties, and this process is full of incitement against Palestinians, and it's like became actually like Palestinian citizens have to go to the election committee and to prove that they are capable or that they are good enough to run to this in this election. They have to go to ask for a permit. And it's ended with yesterday's Netanyahu call that when he told his voters that they should go and vote because the Arabs are voting a lot. Like he was saying that the high rate of voting among the Arab community inside Israel is a problem that they need to deal with. So this all campaign or this election or this whole election was full within in that incitement against Palestinians, and I think that we will see the results very soon of this incitement.
Right. And maybe Noam, for you, I'm curious, what is the conversation inside Israel also about the tremendous exclusion of people under Israeli control from voting at all? I think beyond the sort of suppression of people who technically have the right to vote, right? There are also millions of people, Palestinians, living in the West Bank and Gaza and in the diaspora who have no right to vote, period. Do they show up in conversations about this? Is that something that's in the air at all? Where does that fit in?
No, I think in the psyche of Israelis, there's a separation between democratic Israel and the West Bank. The West Bank is sort of considered an external part of the system and not an internal one. So people are going to say, well, it's something temporary, and the Arab residents will have those situations resolved sometime, but they will not get voting rights within Israel. Of course, one needs to ask how temporary is temporary. In this this government is due to serve when the occupation will celebrate 50 years. That's half a century, and that's, I think, is as permanent as things get in modern history. Yeah, you need to ask yourself, what is a functioning democracy, and to what extent the country can be called a functioning democracy if it deprives the right to vote for almost a third of the people under its direct sovereignty. So I don't think it's been a part of the Israeli conversation. What did happen was that, and that's an interesting development, was that Netanyahu in the last week made two statements in which he completely rejected the two-state solution, said that's never going to happen on his watch. And I think that some of the facade of the peace process and the two-state solution as an end goal disappeared in the last week. And people need to ask themselves, both in Israel and outside Israel, if not the two-state, then what? If Netanyahu is declaring that Israel is going to maintain control of the West Bank for good, or at least for the foreseeable future, what kind of political arrangement needs to happen there? What are the implications on the West view of Israel as a functioning democracy? And I think these are important questions that needs to be debated inside Israel and outside Israel right now.
And how, for both of you two, I'd love to hear, how important of a statement do you think that is? I mean, this is a man who has made it quite clear at every opportunity that he doesn't believe in a Palestinian state and has no intention of letting one be created under his watch or while he can do anything about it. So was that just a moment of exceptionally blunt campaigning, or actually was that a new commitment or a new? And do you think that from the side of the international community that will be heard as sort of tearing down this facade, that there is any interest from his part, from his party's part, in an actual peace process?
I tend to say oh, go ahead, Salah.
I didn't get the question.
Oh, just the question was simply, do you think it was a big deal what Netanyahu said, rejecting a two-state solution or rejecting a Palestinian state last week, or was that just another version of something he has said in one way or another for a very long time? Will that change anything now that he said that and been reelected?
I think this is very important and very good that he said that, because in the past 15 years, Israel is doing this, is rejecting the two-state solution and taking control over Area C and building more and more in the West Bank and killing all the opportunities for two-state solution to the outside world or to the international community, saying that we are in a negotiation with the Palestinians. And when the Palestinians trying to do anything else or to go to the UN or to any international body, they say that you are doing something that will harm the two-state solution. It's good that Netanyahu is saying that clearly now, that there is no way of two-state solution. And I saw a smart analysis today that is saying that Netanyahu became today the leader of the BDS movement, Actually, he is now leading the BDS movement, and he is giving a good he used to give, but he's more material, more and more materials, or I would say weapons or whatever, to the BDS movement and for international pressure. And this is also right for the Zionist and a note to the Palestinians during the past year saying that Netanyahu is coming to the end of his era, and now we are waiting for the new government. So please don't go, or try not to go, or postpone all of your moves in the international bodies, in the UN, in the ICC, International Criminal Court, and other things. And don't do these steps, because Netanyahu is stepping down and new government is coming in Israel. And now Netanyahu is back with more power, Israeli government, and this had must cause some changes in this regard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I would add something to that. I would say that people tend to say, well, everybody knew that Netanyahu was not serious about the two-state solution, but he was, I think, to a certain point, serious about checking whether he can reach an agreement with the United States about a sort of modified status quo that ease some of the pressure from him. And I think that the latest declaration shows two things. Internally, Netanyahu is moving to the right. He recognizes that his constituency is the base at the right, and he's moving there, and he's more blunt than ever. And this relates to what we said earlier about the new powers that he had from these elections. I also think that it's a response to the regional developments. I think that we discussed a lot of the criticism in Israel, but there is a serious thinking in Israel. This is not the right time to do anything. So, because of the developments on Israel's border, in Syria and the Sinai Peninsula, I think that even from an Israeli centrist opinion, the likelihood of a two-state solution drops severely given the regional circumstances, and the two approaches connect for me with a need by international institutions and by stakeholders to do what academics and activists have been doing for a long time, and that's start thinking seriously about other solutions.
And how much space do you think, and maybe Salah, you could start with this, how much space do you think was created yesterday for that? How much did this smooth the road to the ICC? Did this make, do you expect that this will make other international agencies move, if not more quickly, at least less slowly? I mean, what will be the impact if, in fact, that analysis you put out, Noam, is sort of the analysis they take up?
Well, I think that there is too much hope laid in the international community right now. I think people say, well, now it's clear that Netanyahu is going to the two-state solution, then the international community is going to intervene. And one of the depressing elements of this moment in the Middle East is that we saw how short-handed the international community, even with way less favorable countries. I think that you saw the failing of the international community to seriously engage in Syria and in other places. I'm not that optimistic at that moment. I think that Palestinians will need to take the lead of the process and start producing effective policy. They will need to think seriously about the division between Hamas and the PA if they want to really challenge the occupation. I'm not going to give advice to the oppressed people or to the occupied people, but I think that, sitting and waiting for the world to rescue us from the occupation, if you're Palestinian, to rescue us from Israel, if you're an Israeli lefty, to rescue us from Netanyahu, we've been doing that a lot, and it's not working.
Salah?
It depends, and I don't know if Netanyahu will go at the end of the day on the coalition that it seems now with the right wing of Lieberman and Bennett and the ultra-Orthodox parties. If he will do this, and taking into consideration that the Likud list now looks very, very bad, things will help or will push into this direction with more international playing, the international institution playing more a larger role in the area. But like I'm now in Geneva, participating in the Human Rights Council session about minorities, and we heard a lot about what's happening in Israel right now. Everybody is busy and everybody is asking about the Israeli election, but it seems like despite the fact that we like to think about, or from my perspective, that Israel is now more isolated and has less power, but it seems like Israel is having and the main international institution in the UN, in the EU, and affecting a lot the US and the American administration. It would take time to see what happened here and how things are going and developing now. All the attempts to understand how Netanyahu will behave or will do or will act were failed, especially in the past years, especially with this election. Nobody could expect how the result of the election. So I think that things need a bit of more time. I think that we will. We also need a bit more time to understand what happened here in the past in these elections. What we say now is right about for this moment, but I think that after a few days, after a few weeks, we will understand better those elections and the effects that they will bring on the region.
Great, and I want to follow up with you too to respond to something that Noam wrote yesterday, or I think yesterday, maybe late last night or early this morning. And he wrote that for years we have been hearing that Israel will either end the occupation or cease to be a democracy. And then he asked, could it be that the Jewish public has made its choice? And so again, I know you're saying that we have time to figure out what actually has happened and how it will roll out, but does it feel like that moment of choice or like a moment of recognition happened last night? If you could start, thank you.
Oh, you said it. All right. Yeah, I think that. I think that this is the debate that every community and every group of activists need to have right now. The Jewish public need to have it. The Zionist left in Israel need to have this debate. The radical left need to have this debate. Why, among us Israelis on the left, we need to ask ourselves whether we should be aligning more fiercely with the joint list, maybe whether we should create other internal processes. I think, and Israel supporters, at least the liberal supporters, should ask tough questions at this moment. I think that a lot of us in Israel are in a quasi-state of shock on the left. Now, I wrote for 2 months that I don't think Netanyahu is going to lose these elections. I think he's going to win them. But there's one thing to write it down and to think about it analytically, and there's another thing to see it in action. And there's a lot of disappointment and even a state of shock inside the left right now. And I hear all kinds of talk. I hear people rethinking tactics and rethinking political structures. And I think that some of this talk will also be about this question about democracy and how you relate to the occupation. Do you need a new framing and do you need a new thinking?
Salah, what do you think? How does that quote strike you as a read on what's going on? Oh. Salah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I actually wanted your opinion too. Do you think that this, Noam writes that this maybe was the moment where the choice between Jewish and democratic was made? Does it seem like that moment to you?
I'm not sure. Actually, as I started and said that the main moves were inside the blocks or the camps, between the inside the right-wing camp and inside the left camp or the central left camp. So I don't know if that seem if there is any change and that there is any that this election says anything about the Israeli public that haven't said before. I think that it's always been that the Israeli public is a right wing, and I don't think that it now became more right wing and more for the settlements and more for the for the right wing agenda. The only thing that concerned me about this is that Netanyahu and others, like during the elections, we received many messages on WhatsApp and to our mobile phones saying that Arabs are going to vote and they are massively voting and you should go and vote. This for this kind of things never happened before. So I'm still, honestly, I still don't understand fully or cannot understand fully what happened really in these elections. My personal impression is that what used to be is going to continue to be. I'm worried that the right wing will do major steps that will harm all of us if they will try to continue the trend or the voices that used to be before and changing the situation in Jerusalem that might bring the third intifada or doing other foolish steps that they can bend the area, or will try to go over and to try to manage the conflict instead of trying to solve it. This is used to be the tactics and the strategies of Netanyahu in the past few years. Is trying to deal with the international pressure, trying to deal with the Palestinian issue, to think and not to solve them or to suggest any solution. So I don't know exactly what even Netanyahu wants, but in this stage, in this time, I think it's a bit early to try to guess what will happen. Although I think that this losing this election after all the momentum that happened with the Zionist camp in the past few weeks is need to take the Israeli left or the Israeli central left should take this very seriously and to rethink his way to try to and I hope that a new thing will emerge out of all of this. Meretz was in exactly on the limit. The Zionist party, the Zionist camp, after they expected to, they lost after they expected to win this election. I hope that out of all this situation will emerge something new that will bring another hope or a serious hope to this place.
And I want to also ask about that specifically for Jewish Voice for Peace members and our supporters. Obviously, we're an American Jewish organization. We work through the BDS movement as one of our main strategies. And what do you, each of you, I'd like to hear from. What do you think we should take away from this, and what specifically in relationship to BDS campaigns, what does this mean for how we should act and move going forward?
Well, I think the BDS issue is obviously the hot topic right now between all the organization and the political movement, and it's an important question. I think that the right thing to do is, if you want to stand with solidarity with Palestinians, is to stand with to follow their lead on issues of activism. And the question for me as an Israeli is, what forms of activism does Israel even allow? What form of political participation Israel allows to the Palestinian? And the answer is none. Israel views everything as terrorism, cultural terrorism, or economic terrorism. The BDS is often referred to. I think the BDS is a legitimate Palestinian non-violent tactic against the occupation, and it should be seen and respected this way by movements around the world.
After the result of this election, I think that BDS is the last peaceful tool that might bring change to this area. Like, we exhausted all the remedies. We tried everything possible. even the most liberal institutions inside Israel that used to be the Supreme Court that used to give a lot of solutions for issues inside Israel is becoming more and more how we say more and more conservative and less activist, and trying to even these few paths that we used to use in order to improve the situation inside Israel are becoming more and more less and less effective, let's say. And I think although Adala is and it doesn't do BDS, it's out of our mandate. We don't use this tool, but I think it's the last peaceful method to try to change things in this area.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to close out. I want to ask you both one last question, the same question to each of you. What is the one thing you're going to be paying attention to most in the coming days and weeks to sort out what actually the impact of this election will be?
Well, I'm going to be looking at two things. I'm going to be looking first at the international response to this government. Obviously, it will take, as Salah said, a few days. But this is going to be an extreme right-wing government, and it was elected with a majority from the Israeli public. You know, there was a piece by Dennis Ross in the New York Times before the election saying that we should postpone all measures and wait for give Israelis a chance to elect a peace candidate. Well, Israel elected Netanyahu again, and I think that the international dynamic around that would be something that we should watch closely. We'll see whether there's willingness to critically engage with this government, or there's a handoff policy by stakeholders saying we wasted too much energy on that, so we'll just let the two sides, you know, in holding patterns until things will change. The second things I'm going to watch is I'm going to watch the joint list internally. I think the joint list is the most important political project of this, maybe of the decade for me as an Israeli progressive. I think that, you know, it's unimaginable and it's difficult to explain how unique this project is, in the sense that it brings together actually the Muslim Brotherhood representative with the communist, with Jewish representatives in it, with the nationalists, with the Nazarism, you know, relics in politics, in the name of democracy, under liberal values. You have feminists sitting with diehard Muslims, and for me, supporting this project was the most encouraging element of these elections. I hope the list survives. It's going to meet a lot of hurdles, and I think it is examples both to Jews and Arabs in this region.
Thank you so much. Salah?
For me, the same. The united list or the joint list is the most important thing happened in this election. For me, this will affect the politics of Palestinians inside Israel for many, many years. They have different options that they can go on. I was a little bit active in these elections, and all what I heard during the elections is that if the Arab list will destruct, like will break up, or that will be a big disappointment for people, and this will actually decide about the future participation of Palestinians inside Israel. I don't know how the United List will use the power that they got. 14 seats is a serious power. I don't know how this will affect the situation of Palestinians inside Israel in many different issues and many different. All these questions are very important. I don't know if that will. Anyway, my main point is that the coming elections for the Arab minority inside Israel will never be like the elections in the past. Like what this joint list will do will affect the political participations of Palestinians inside Israel for many years ahead. Because until now, and until this election, if the joint list wasn't established, I think that the participation rate inside the Palestinian community in Israel would be very, very low. And there is a huge debate going on whether to participate or to boycott the election, if we should be act as a part of this political program or political game inside Israel, or we should watch from the side. All these questions will come to debate and will be decided according to the performance of the Arab list and of the way that it would take. So for me, the most important thing now is the Arab list and how it will act in the coming near future.
All right. Great. Thank you both so much. It's incredibly helpful to all of us. Very much appreciate it. Salam Mohsen from Adala, the Legal Center for Arab Minority Rights in Israel, and Noam Shezaf from 972 Magazine. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.